Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. Got a lot to talk about today. Came off a loss this weekend. Welcome into the show, Seahawks Playbook Podcast. We're doing the video. We've got all sorts of stuff going on. We're part of a new podcast network, the Pigskin Podcast Network. We've got some sponsors. It seems like it's all happening all at the same time, Keith. So how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, except for the fact that fall's officially here, in that the weather on Saturday was really nice, and Sunday it was like, and then today it's just dumping rain. It's like, hey,
we had a lot of rain yesterday.
This is the Pacific Northwest I'm used to, just pouring rain all the time. So it's like,
it was actually like in the 60s yesterday for a little bit. Today it's warmed up into the 80s and no rain today. So it's now it's supposed to be nicer. Earlier, it would look like it might continue being unseasonal for a few days. But anyway, so I thought right at the top of the show, we're going to get into our sponsor, the DraftKings Network. And we've got a spot to read for them. And we're going to go ahead and do that right at the top. So week 3 of football is in the books, and now it's time to review the tape and get ready for week 4 with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. To kick off another action-packed week, DraftKings is giving new customers $150 instantly when they bet $1 on any football game. Now listen up, because you don't want to miss this. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code TPPN to receive $150 in free bets when you place a $1 bet on any football game. That's promo code TPPN this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 and older. New Jersey, Indiana, Pennsylvania are the only states right now that have that clause in this deal. New customers only, minimum $5 bet and deposit, $1 wager, 1 per customer, restrictions apply, all that stuff. See DraftKings.com for all the details. So that's it, Keith. Awesome. We're into the show.
We are.
So unfortunately,
I was saying thanks for doing the read, because I just got to sit here and watch, and that was fun.
Well, unfortunately, it's 2 weeks in a row where we're coming off really terrible losses in the way that we lost. Built early leads, looked like things were rolling. We had forced a 3-and-out against the Vikings. We were up 17-7 early. And then from there on, it was all Vikings. And so we just have a ton to kind of talk about, try to figure out. A lot of it, like 80-90% of it is on defense. But there are some issues on offense, but usually they seem like they're originating on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, you're saying we forced it up 17-7, forced a 3-and-out, except Ugo Amadi with a dumb defensive holding penalty.
Well, that was after that, I think.
Was it? No.
Yeah, they had 1 3-and-out where we got them off the field, and that's where we scored again.
Okay.
So that happened early, but yeah, you're right. We had them on the ropes. Right then we had them on the ropes, Keith.
Yeah, well, because it was a touchdown. It was a touchdown, and then the 3-and-out punt, and then 3-and-out again. Right. And then we had the Ugo Amadi penalty, which extended the drive. That drive went for a touchdown, and literally the Vikings scored every single possession then until 23 seconds left in the game. 6 of 7
possessions were scoring possessions for them.
Yep.
At that point. Yeah. I mean, Kirk Cousins, and we've talked about Kirk Cousins over the years quite a bit, about not being able to finish games, not being able to go down and score, all that kind of stuff. Man, did he look good. And let me tell you this. He finished 30 of 38, 323 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. But check this out. In his last 10 games, where he ranks in the NFL, 3,036 yards, second, 26 touchdowns, third, 2 interceptions, which is really impressive for him.
For 10 games,
tied for third, and 70.51 completion percentage overall, third in the NFL. So maybe it's time that we start looking at Kirk Cousins as being a little better now than he was just a few years ago. He's, this offensive performance. Now, granted, it came against the Seahawks defense, which is currently, it has to be near the bottom of the NFL, but they rank last in pass defense, 26th in run defense overall. So
they're just bad.
They're horrible.
So I will say that typically with Kirk Cousins is if you give him time, he'll eat you up. But if you move him off his spot even a little bit, he falls.
Yes,
he's just
that's correct.
He's not a guy that operates without a clean pocket. But there were times in this game where the Seahawks had a lot of pressure, and he threw dimes. He was very accurate, hitting guys when it looked like the Seahawks were about to get a sack. I was kind of impressed. Like, he actually had a really, really good game. And it wasn't just that he was able to sit back and pick apart a bad defense that couldn't get pressure. He
picked apart a defense that couldn't get any coverage. I mean, where you have, 6 or 7 yards off of receivers, it's pretty easy to make completions. Now, granted, he did some of that while he was, getting rid of the ball just as he was getting hit, but not many times. And
the entire secondary looked like 2020's Quentin Dunbar. It was bad. I mean, it was terrible. And we can go through all of that, but I just
it's the third down conversions too. I mean, all of it, just all of it. We can talk about all of it. So let's kind of go through the game. So you mentioned the first half, and something happened. It's like the defense was okay during that first quarter and a half, and then about that second quarter, halfway through, Seattle turned it completely off, and the Vikings turned it completely on, and never. Did that was that contested in any way, shape, or form after that?
Starting in the second quarter. So the Vikings had 2 possessions that started in the first quarter. The first one was a long 70-yard drive touchdown. The second one was a 3-and-out that actually ended in the second quarter. But every possession that started in the second quarter or later went touchdown, touchdown, field goal, field goal, field goal.
Oh,
and then
brutal. What did the Seahawks do in that same period?
So
0. We had all those 17 points early, and then
so the Seahawks went touchdown, field goal, touchdown, missed field goal. So they had 4 drives that were all 50 yards or greater.
Which is hopeful. I mean, let's break the offense down really quick, because we're going to spend the majority of this show talking about the defense. The offense is actually fairly decent. I think Russell Wilson leads the league in quarterback rating. If you take a look at the DVOA, the Seahawks offense, just because of the way it's been scoring and so forth, is ranked very highly in DVOA. I think it is even number 1 in the NFL. And but something's happening. So teams that we're facing have run 52 more plays than them and had the ball almost 32 more minutes so far this year than the Seahawks. And so
what you're saying, you're in what happened to the offense? I can tell you what happened in one stat. The Seahawks had 1 possession in the third quarter.
Yeah, they haven't scored yet in the third quarter this year.
So as of in this game, after once because the Vikings started with the ball and used up had an 8-minute and 26-second drive that ended in a field goal. Then the Seahawks got 1 first down, 5 plays, ended up punting. And then the Vikings had another drive that was 5 minutes and a second that ended in a field goal. And that was combined the entire third quarter. The Seahawks had one possession. They were in 5 plays in the third quarter. And as much as we want to be like, oh man, it would be nice if the Seahawks could have done something, there's no rhythm that can happen when you don't get a chance to run any plays. You go a whole quarter with one possession and you run 5 plays.
Yeah, and in one mistake can make that drive either a penalty or a missed opportunity in catching the ball, where you just don't make that connection, and all of a sudden your drive is over before it begins. You know, it's interesting. The teams with no turnovers and at least 7 yards per play are 12-2 in the last 2 seasons. Those lone 2 losses have been the Seattle Seahawks in the last 2 games.
Weeks. Yep.
So that kind of tells you everything you really need to know. It's not the offense.
Yep. So the Seahawks only had 3 possessions in the second half. I don't count
the time of possession over the last couple of games, Keith, is just absurd.
Yeah, and so this is why the offense has been stagnating in the second half. They only had 3 possessions. The defense couldn't get off the field. You know, between possessions, I mean, we're talking like
third down after third down conversion after big play after big play. And when I'm saying big play, it's like everything that's not completely over the top big play, but underneath, like plus 10 yards. There was a ton of those. There was a ton of plays in the middle of the field, extending, first downs, extending drives, 10, 15-yard chunks at a time. It's like, oh my goodness, the middle of the field is just being pillaged by opposing offenses. And, there's a lot of stuff going on to talk about. There's a lot of despair online, and that's putting it nicely. There's a lot of hand wrangling, trying to figure out what's going on. A lot of players are coming out, and coaches are making statements now about what they think is going on. Of course, Pete is staying fairly focused, straight ahead. He kind of knows what the defense is supposed to look like, but he just can't figure out exactly why it's not. You've got players on the back end like Mahdi and Flowers and Reed coming out and making statements about scheme issues and communication. And then underlying some of that is, they're trying to deflect a little bit of blame to the scheme and the fact that certain parts of that scheme aren't playing well, i.e. the linebackers, because the linebackers are, since you're doing cover 3 and you're preventing things from over the top, which according to Trey Flowers, both he and Reed are playing the way that the Seahawks want them to play, but underneath coverage is exposing them to these completions, everything that's underneath, extending drives, just eating the Hawks alive. But I disagree with him a little bit. And what I disagree with him on is the fact that they are so soft right now. Like, I've never seen a defense so soft in my life. They have no energy, no intensity at all. You can go watch any other game in the NFL, Keith. You're watching man-to-man coverage, guys getting smacked as soon as they get the ball, contested pass coverages. We've had five contested passes in 3 games. 4 of those were defensive linemen batting the ball down. 1 play by Bobby Wagner, and 1 play by Ugo Amadi. 1 defensive back has made a pass defense in 3 games.
Yeah.
So everyone is wide open. It's like that is just not an NFL defense.
No, it's not. And the thing is that in some sense, Flowers and company aren't wrong. They're being told to bail out of, off the line.
Yes, because they're in zone, the quote unquote zone coverage, not
they are.
Coverage.
They're in cover 3, which is a zone coverage, and the corners are responsible for the deep outside third. So you've got the free safety in the middle. Each corner has the outside third, and they've got to get deep. So they are bailing, and they're getting.
So talk
depth.
to me exactly what that looks like when when you've got a fan, somebody that's listening to the show, watching the game, what are they seeing when that transition is happening? Like on the field, when you say bail, what's going on with Trey Flowers when he bails on a route and falls deeper?
Because that's his responsibility is. He's got that deep third of the field, so he's got to get depth and keep everything in front of him. Because what the team wants is the team wants 3 players on the back end, the 2 outside corners and the free safety, all deeper than the deepest guy. Now,
so what's happening is if the offense is running 3 routes on a play, maybe plus a tight end, you've got 2 outside corners and the free safety. They're going to pick up those wide receivers typically.
They don't.
And as soon as they get to a certain point, where wide receivers are cutting off routes short, but they still have a guy or 2 going deeper, those outside corners are going to continue to go deep and hand those shorter route receivers off to either safeties or linebackers. Is that correct?
Okay. Not really, because when you're you're defining that as a man-to-man concept where you've got this guy until they reach a point and then you hand him off to another player who's got coverage. You are responsible for a chunk of the field, and you are to cover anything that goes on in your chunk of the field. It doesn't matter what the offense is doing in that zone. I mean, you are if there's a player in your chunk of the field, yeah, you should make sure that they are covered up. But your first responsibility is don't let them get behind you. Your second responsibility is to make a play on the ball or to make a play. The idea being that you can't, by not getting deep, everything's going to end up thrown short, and then the linebackers and safeties need to make tackles short, come up and make a play.
So if Bobby Wagner leaves the game and has 11 tackles, had 20 last week, what's wrong? Like, where is the disconnect here?
Well, who else? Like, what were Jordan Brooks' tackles? What were Cody Barton's tackles? What were Darrell Taylor's tackles? Like, why are these guys getting, because they're completing all of these short passes in front of, all the zones, and there isn't anything else supporting there. So Flowers and company have a point. They do.
Flowers gave up 7 receptions on 7 targets for 78 yards, 4 first downs, and 40 coverage snaps.
The problem with that is that you're getting that off Pro Football Focus, which is assigning him blame for a target, even if he's the nearest guy, even if the guy isn't in his zone and responsibility.
Fair.
Those stats are entirely based on, if it were man coverage, these would be his stats, but they're not. The Seahawks play zone. They play cover 3 on almost every freaking play. Now, in the past, they've also gone to cover 2, which has allowed those corners to roll up into the flat, and you've got 2 safeties back, and the locations of all the zones are very different. Instead of being the back third of the field, now you've got up near the line of scrimmage, you've got the flat and up to 10 yards as a cornerback, and you're playing on the wide front zone. And honestly, there wasn't a lot of that. There was very little attempt to go to a cover 2, and the Seahawks played well in a cover 2 week 1, and they haven't really come back to it. They've stayed away from it.
Do we have the personnel to play man?
I think
it seems like Flowers would be.
Trey Flowers. You look at his at what happens with him. The Seahawks play very little man, and they have played very little man since Pete Carroll became their coach. But when they do, Trey Flowers is a pretty good man-to-man corner. He is not a good zone corner, and I think the stats bear that out. In zone coverage, he struggles. He just does. But in man, he's actually played pretty well. I would like to see them, because they start out with the corners up near the line of scrimmage, instead of asking him and Reed to bail on and get deep, let him jam the receivers at the line. Let him stay in man coverage. or let them jam the receivers at the line and then stay in those outside zones, the flat zones in the cover too, and give someone else the responsibility of that deep part. And I think it would be at least different. It would be a better use of at least Flowers' skill set. I got to tell you, DJ Reed is a pretty good man corner as well. And so that would be.
But they're both having their moments in this scheme, and I, what we saw last year was really encouraging from Reed. I think even Flowers in the last 5 or 6 games really kind of came on strong and looked hopeful. Mm-hmm. And then he beat out Witherspoon. They traded him away. So
now they could use Witherspoon right now.
Seemingly, but maybe Sidney Jones come in. But Reed looked schooled on a few plays, especially that end zone play where he was caught going in hard, and the wide receiver Jefferson just broke outside and it was clearly open.
Yeah,
there's just no contested throws. There's no contested routes. There's no rubs where guys are hand fighting at the line of scrimmage so that their timing is off. There's no physicality in this defense whatsoever.
No, not at all.
Which is just so strange to me to see a Pete Carroll defense without any physicality at all. What is going on?
It's really frustrating. And it's really frustrating, especially in the passing game situation, so I'm not okay. I want to go back a little bit because I don't want to give Flowers a free pass, because he is being asked to bail and not necessarily contest early in these routes. But there are times when there's guys in his zone and he's so worried about staying deeper than them that he's letting them do whatever they want in front of him. And so he isn't playing well, and he's not a good zone corner.
Yeah, well, Pete came out and said he thinks guys were frustrated, and he's speaking to Flowers. Mm-hmm. You could see Flowers on the sideline, yelling and kind of screaming about stuff, frustrated about being preoccupied, quote unquote, Pete Carroll's word, with staying on top of routes and frequently giving up underneath stuff, normal cover 3 scheme stuff. That's from ESPN. So
I saw a lot of miscommunication going on in this game. There was one of the touchdowns where you saw multiple players going to one receiver and leaving a player empty. You saw a situation on the Adam Thielen play where you had Reed who was covering Thielen and was there. It was actually pretty good coverage, but a great throw and a great catch. Playing man-to-man. You had other player playing man-to-man, and then you had Flowers on the opposite side dropping into cover 3 zone, which left someone wide open in the middle. If Cousins threw the ball through a great pass to a covered receiver who happened to make a good catch and score. If he throws it to the crosser going across the middle who has no one within 15 yards of him, he catches it and walks into the corner. And so it's not like, ooh, they only got beat because of the good throw. He took the harder option and still made it a touchdown. But there was an easier option because Flowers didn't follow the route across, but everyone else seemed to think that he was supposed to be in man-to-man coverage there.
So let me ask you this. Okay. So the Seahawks lose 30-17, 453 total yards to the Vikings. They were 9 of 14 on third down conversions. Something that nobody's really talking about right now that I would like to talk about is our run defense. We may be really bad on pass defense, but we're ranked 26th in the NFL in run defense as well. Mm-hmm. And you can't be bad at both in the NFL and hope to succeed. And you're not giving your offense, led by one of the best quarterbacks in the league, enough opportunities to be effective and go win you games. And so something has got to happen. To me, I think the scheme stuff, and I think Trey Flowers has got a point here in that, and Pete Carroll does too, in that they believe that the thing can get fixed. The scheme part of this can get fixed. Now you're always going to have talent issues. I get that, but at least you can mitigate some of the scheme stuff and help these guys at least be more opportunistic, give them an opportunity to use their skill sets and their physicality to kind of bring this thing back a little bit. My more important issue for me personally is our ineffectiveness in stopping the run. I'm not sure that you can fix that because Brian Monet is the only guy in there. Poona Ford's doing a great job, but they're asking him to do a few different things this year. It seems like Rasheem Green's good on the edge, but when they move him inside, he's going to get swallowed up in there. Do we need to get some sort of an additional run stuffing guy in this defensive line?
Well,
or is this a scheme thing too?
I think this is a scheme thing too. You're talking about, Poona Ford is playing well, but they're asking him to do a lot of things. When was Poona Ford at his best? I'd say most of last year, when they were asking him to do a couple of really important things and then occasionally go get pressure on a quarterback. But mostly his job was to be the nose tackle. Now they're asking him to penetrate. They're asking him to do a bunch of different things, which is great for him. And it's great in theory, but he's no longer anchoring that line as the nose tackle that you have to double team and is being, and just setting the middle of the field. Now you're kind of expecting Brian Monet or Al Woods or some of those guys to do some similar things.
Players, but
no, they are, but they're not really nose tackles. And what you're seeing is Brooks and Wagner have guys on them. They're having to come off blocks way more than you want. And so again, I think some of it can be scheme related, in that you can, get Darrell Taylor up onto the line of scrimmage. So you're really playing with 5.
Yeah. So I texted you over the weekend. I said, would it be smart of them to kind of play Darrell Taylor in more of a 5-tech role?
Yeah.
Because he can kind of set that edge a little bit and at least contain some of that stuff. Because it seems like the stuff that we're really getting burned on. Now, some of it's up the middle, but most of it's around the corners.
Yeah. So they could do that.
They allowed Alexander Madison,
I know,
112 yards, and then he caught 59 yards receiving. He ate him up. So they were getting burned on all these screens, and well, we talked about that too.
Minnesota has a have got
very good screen.
They've got a very good screen game. It's well designed. They run it from a lot of different looks to a lot of different players, and at some point somebody's got to make a play. And we're so used to Wagner and Wright being the guys making those plays. Well, guess what? KJ Wright's not here anymore. Wagner's made a few of those plays, but not enough. And you're not seeing Darrell Taylor and Jordan Brooks make those plays. They're getting fooled and out of position. And there was one screen where Jordan Brooks was out there, but
and Adams too.
Yeah. But they're blocked. They've got linemen on them. And so you've got, a 320-pound guy out making a block 5 yards downfield, and it's hard for the linebackers to get
so
off.
All we've talked about for like nearly 10 minutes, Keith, is stuff that's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's a long list.
It's very long.
And you're not done yet.
Oh, I'm not. We can keep going. Here's the thing. We could totally keep going with all the things that are wrong with this defense. Some of it is a talent issue at cornerback. I like DJ Reed. I don't think Trey Flowers needs to be your number 2 corner. He should be a number 3 or a number 4 corner. I like Ugo Amadi in the nickel, but he's a smaller guy who gives up stuff. And with that,
and Blair was hurt.
Yeah, and Blair got hurt in warm-up.
So let's do this. We're gonna end this show. Surprisingly, shockingly, because I literally thought we were going to be at about 15 minutes, and I just looked at the clock. We're at 30.
We're at 30. Yep.
Why don't we continue this conversation in our second show this week, and we'll kind of get into the weeds a little bit about some of these individual players, some of the individual things that we can spend a little bit more time talking about, both the offense and the defense.
And I think within the defense, we can point to where the problems are coming from. And I don't think that it's going to be a huge surprise to the listeners where that's going to be. But let's save that for show 2.
And we'll see if we agree on that.
Yep.
Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. All right.
I can't imagine that we don't.
You can follow Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. Seahawksplaybook.com online has all the shows. It's got a few other extras. It's got some great NFL news feeds on there as well. So you can kind of get in there and stay there for a while. If you spend some time on our website, you can be on our any podcast platform that you use. We're going to be available on those, as well as YouTube. Come out and check us out on YouTube. You can watch us live on screen and interact with us that way in the comment section, which is can sometimes be a lively discussion as well. So until next time, go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.